Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lib 105 week 3. This is the week that starts all the good stuff. So we're going to be actually starting to learn and go through actually how we catalog, and it starts this week. Although next week is when we really start getting into it, but this is definitely a jumping off point. Um, just again to remind you, I will be doing my office hours today from 4 to 6, from 5:30 to 6. I'm assuming people show up. I will be going over Library World. And if you have any questions about that, there's a video from the prof from last year who has thankfully allowed me to keep it up of how to go through it. The login information is all there. If you have any questions specifically from 5:30 to 6, please log on. We can kind of go over it as a class if needed, whoever shows up. I can answer any of the questions and kind of go through that. Again, but if you have any other questions or just want to jump on, I can't do 5:30, please feel free to come on anytime between 4 and 6 tonight for my office hours. Okay, let's start talking about our content, media, and carrier types. This is what the chapter is about in your book that you're going to read this week if you have not already. I'm going to go over kind of an overview of what the book talks about as well. You're going to be like, well, I just read this. Or when you read it, you're going to be like, well, you just talked about this. I am going to be going over it, and I understand there's going to be a lot of overlap. That's purposeful because we do need to learn how to do this. A lot of this is, this is part of, we have to understand these concepts when we're cataloging to make sure that we understand this. Now, these fall into, just so you guys know, not that it will matter, but into the 300 fields when you're doing your MARC record, right? So your MARC record, your machine readable catalog record, right? So that's where we put all the different things, has all the different fields in it. That's what you're doing in Library World, by the way. When you go there, you're going to be filling in all the different fields correctly, right? We're learning how to do it. So we're going to be going through it together. But these three things, the content, media, and carrier, will be in the 300 fields. Specifically, contents in 336, media is in 337, and carriers in 338. So let's go through exactly, well, not exactly, let's go through what these are. Content, media, and type. Content, media, and carrier type, sorry. So content and carrier, just so you're aware, are required in the cataloging record per RDA. This was not the case with AACR2, but now with RDA, they are required. So media is not required, although you should really do it. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but both content and carrier you have to do. So what are they? So content is how the material is presented. So is it a written text? Is it performed music, etc.? Right? So it's how is it performed? Like what is it, right? How is it presented? Sorry, I have a lot of notes. I wanted to make sure I was giving you guys the correct information. So that is the content. So you can put in there, I have a little sheet that I printed, a little cheat sheet. You can actually, if you Google it, you'll be able to find it. But like an atlas, for example, the content type is cartographic image. A book, we'll talk a little bit about the term book in a second. Monograph would be text. A book on tape is spoken word. An ebook is text, right? So what is being presented? What is the format? The next one is carrier. And well, the next one's actually media. I take that back. I'm going to jump to carrier because we'll jump back, but carrier is the other required. So, but it's basically naming a media type. You may have more than one, depending on what you're doing. And there are 9 of them, I think. Yeah, there's 9 different types of carrier types. And they're very specific. They are audio, computer, microform, projected image, stereograph, unmediated, sorry, video and volume. Like, what did I write down there? So they are, again, so audio. So write something you hear. It's basically what is the media type, right? So is it something you hear? That kind of a thing is an audio, right? We all know what audio is. Is it a computer, something or other? So is it delivered by the computer? Is it a microform? Does anybody know what a microform is? There's basically microfilm and I just completely blanked. Microfiche. Sorry. There's microfilm and microfiche. So those are things. You have the machines at the library, and you go through them and you put it in, and it looks like a small microfilm, you know, like you roll, it looks like a little small video thing, and you can roll through it. A lot of like old newspapers are kept on there, a lot of old serials. Microforms or microfiche are the flat things. They kind of look like a little bookmark. You can put them in a machine and they blow it up. It's basically ways of keeping lots of materials on a smaller item. So that's the microform. Projected image. So again, anything that's projected, right? Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here, but anything that's a projected image would be fall under projected image. Stereograph, so a record player, basically, a record, basically. Unmediated is kind of everything else that doesn't fall into one of these other 8 categories, would be unmediated. Video, DVDs, VHSs, that kind of thing. Volume is specific to monographs, specific to books. From here on out, we will be using the term monographs, and we will talk a little bit about that later. The next one, again, so we have carrier, we have content, carrier, now media. Media is what we will use to consume the content. They are the same 8 categories without volume as the carrier was. So we have audio, computer, microform, projected image, stereograph, unmediated, and video. Sorry. In this case, I take that back what I said about unmediated. Unmediated is basically what you need to look at it is your eyes. I'm sorry, I totally take that back what I said. So basically it's books, right? Or an ebook or something. The only thing you need to look at it is your eyes. I take that back. The ebook would probably be computer. So pretty much the only thing, well, not the only thing, would be a monograph. If you had like, or an atlas, something that the only thing that you need to use would be your eyes, that is unmediated. Okay, so that's what we have. We have content. Again, that is what the item is, how the material is presented. So basically written text, perform music, something to that. You know, DVD is 3-dimensional moving image. Is it spoken word, 2-dimensional image, that kind of a thing. Is it notated music, performed music? Basically, what is it? Carrier is you're naming the media type. Again, 9 specific ones that will come up. And then media is how we consume the item. So do we listening to it? Like through an audio? Are we like, do we have to bring it up on a computer? Is it a microform? We have to have special, you know, machine to read it. Unmediated, we're only using our eyes, that kind of a thing. So I do want to make a note, traditional print books. So the Ferber, they're referred to as monographs. They are not referred to as books, but monographs, because books could refer to a number of different things. So, you know, you could think of a book as an atlas, even though it's an atlas, right? Sometimes we bind things, right? We bind a lot of serials together. That could be then considered a book, but they're really not because it's the serials, right? It's a bunch of magazines bound together. So in order to avoid confusion from here on out, when you're cataloging, this is very specific catalog. It's actually specific to the library world. You hear it a lot in the library world, but traditional books. So something that's an actual book is a monograph. That's the technical term. And that is how generally, catalogers and how people in the library will refer to it, monograph. So in this case, we're going to try to use the word monograph as much as possible to refer to a normal, to refer to books, basically what we generally think of as book. Again, it helps to avoid confusion as to what can be considered a book and how that's defined. So if we're taking a book, going back to our books, we have, so the content for this would be a text, right? Because that's what's in it. It is a text of materials, right? It's written materials. The media part, it's unmediated because all we need is our eyes to read it. We don't need anything else. And the carrier is it's a volume. So that is what it is for traditional monograph will always be volume. So when we're talking about traditional monographs, those three things will always be true. It'll be a text for the content, unmediated, I just need my eyes, and carrier is a volume because it comes, this is, it's one volume in this case, right? If it had 10 volumes, it would be the, they have 10 volumes set. In this case, we have one volume. Keep in mind when you're cataloging fiction versus nonfiction, there's just some things that you kind of need to keep in mind. You just kind of need to be aware that that there are some, being specific when we're cataloging them. Just keep that in mind as we go through. I'm not going to get too much into it, but that comes up later. That there are some differences between fiction and nonfiction. Juvenile material versus adult. Sizes matter because we measure, right, all the materials, and pictures and all that matters. And that's a big one between juvenile and adult. Serials are something that comes out serially. So serials are, generally speaking, magazines, newspapers, journals, and anything else that comes out serially. So it could be like an atlas, like a series of maps, maybe that comes out. Or there's some like music sometimes that comes out. But it's anything that comes out serially. Again, the three basic ones are journals, magazines, and newspapers. And then the last type of item that you kind of need to be aware of is the integrating resources. And that is things that are updated at different times. So this could be a website, right? If you have to catalog a website. So you might have a page, like the front page was updated, maybe with a new logo and a new definition, but the rest of the pages were all up the same. So that could be something, or maybe we have a, maybe we have this, probably back in the day they did this, we have a newspaper that the next day a correction was, sent out or something. We could attach that to the newspaper again. That could be something that we would correct. So just keep that in mind. I did want to go over, this is actually in your book and it's page 18. I just want to go over this again, talking about different monographs of different parts of a monograph, just so you're aware of it. Again, this is page 18 of your book, but I just wanted the box, but I just want to go over it so you could actually see it. So the first is a title page. The title page is exactly that. It is, this is interesting. Nope, I can't get to it. Sorry. It is the title page. It has the title on it. It's kind of the first page. It'll have your author on it, Nordhaus, and you have your publisher generally on it. Those are generally the three pieces of information that it has. So title, author, and then he's from Western Michigan University of Indiana. That's what that is. And then the Sage is the publisher. We have the verso, the title page verso. That is the back of the title page. That's what verso means. It's literally the back of, basically. And in this case, it will have lots of additional information. It'll have the copyright date, 2013 by Sage. So Sage Publications holds the copyright for this book. It has your Library of Congress information, which is basically your, most of your MARC information will be there. We have the author, Nordhaus, Peter Guy, Leadership Theory Practice. It's 6th edition. The pages and centimeters, we just have to count. Again, that's the, when you put it in, you count how many pages there are total, and then you measure the book in centimeters. And then we have our, it says includes bibliographic reference and index. So there are references in this book. And we have our ISBN, and ISBN stands for International Standard Book Number. And it is a unique identifier that every monograph is given. ISBN, ISSN is International Standard Serial Number. So that is a number that, again, a unique identifier that is given to all serials. They went from 11 numbers, I don't know what, 10, 15 years back, to 13 numbers now for an ISBN. The nice thing about an ISBN, fun fact, you can search for it generally in a catalog. You can bring it to like Barnes and Noble and say, hey, I want this book. They'll be able to find it for you. We have our subject headings. In this case, it is leadership and leadership case studies. Used to be back in the day, the rule of 3 for subject headings. We'll get into a little bit more. This only has 2, but that generally you would have 3 subject headings for a book. And that had to do with the card catalog, and more than that, theoretically, you'd have like 1,000 subject headings, right? Because we're in lines, you can do as many as you want. This one has 2. We also have our call number. We have both in this case. They're giving us both the LC number and they're giving us the Dewey Decimal number. So our LC number would be the top number here. I don't know if you guys can see, but it is HM 1261.N67 2013. And our Dewey Decimal number is 303.34 DC 23. So just keep that in mind. It gives you all this lovely information on the verso. The next thing is the colophon on your page here on page 18. And this is specific to picture books, photography books, and books produced in France. I happen to have a book of photography in my office. So we're going to show, I was able to show you what that is. But basically, it's the same information that you have on your title and verso, but a title page verso, but it'll be in the back. So as you can see, we have our title, 2015, the author, all the information that we have on the verso is going to be here as well in the very back of the book. Again, that is very specific. And again, this is just it's literally a picture book. So there's literally just pictures in this book. But that is, again, that's the colophon, and that is specific to picture books, artistic photography books, and books produced in France. You also will have preliminary pages. You do count those separately, just so you know, when you're doing those, when you're cataloging the book. So in this case, so we have all of these are our preliminary pages, and they're done in Roman numerals when you're cataloging the book. In this case, these are all of our preliminary pages. There is a Roman numeral. I don't know if you can see that, but right there. So there are 8, no, take that back, there are 18. So there's basically 18 preliminary pages. So those are actually cataloged as a Roman numeral. They go first, and you put the actual XVIII 18 for your Roman numerals for the preliminary pages. Then the pages start. And they are going to be pretty much the rest of the book, right? From here on out. So in this case, there are 489 total pages of this book. So that would be the page count would be 489 actual pages. So we have 18 preliminary pages, 409 actual number pages. Also, you would count the number of illustrations. Sorry, I'm totally kidding. So this is everything that's generally an illustration. So it's content that cannot be created using a keyboard. Basically, I don't know that there's any in this book. Obviously in my lunchtime book, it's all because it's a photograph, it's an artistic photograph book. So literally every single page would be counted as an illustration. So every single page, pretty much except for the preliminary pages in this book, would be an illustration. So that would be count as illustrations. And so you would say, so in the old days, it says here, illustrations were by default black and white. However, nowadays, generally, they are in color. In this case, again, this whole entire book would be illustrations. So the cover is front cover, back cover, and the spine logo. This is the cover of the book when you're talking about that. The bibliographic references or any reference material. These can be footnotes. They can be references at the end of the chapter. In this case, there's a whole bibliography. I take that back. So basically, in this case, it would be the references at the end of each chapter would be considered the bibliographical references. The filmography would be, it's specific to movies and television shows. So you would list actors, producers, directors, others that have been involved in it. The nice thing about a filmography and like a catalog is you can search on the author tab for an actor. So if you go to like the PCC library, if anyone wants to try this, choose an actor, like you can do an author search for Tom Hanks. It'll show you all the movies, for example, all the DVDs, all the VHSs, whatever, streaming if they have that integrated as well, that star Tom Hanks, for example. And then the web bibliography is a list of web resources either cited in the book or suggested for further information. So specific web pages, specific web bibliography information. Sometimes like, go to this web page for further information. That's part of the book as well. So those are the parts of the book. Again, page 18. You can always go through this as well, but just kind of so you see what a monograph, kind of the different parts of a monograph are. In addition, there's audiovisual materials. So we have, so another type of material, right, is the audiovisual materials, movies, DVDs, that kind of a thing. We also have spoken word. So if you have, for example, a book on tape, that is spoken word, right? Somebody reading a book. Music sound, so recordings of music would fall under that. Ebooks, specifically, again, ebooks. So books that are now electronic. And then government docs. So government docs are fun. They're federal government is what we're talking about. And there are specific libraries that are government depositories. Some take all the information. A lot of them just take everything they publish, the government publishes. A lot of them just take like a piece of it. One thing to be aware of for the government docs are they are cataloged differently. So we know LCS, we know Library of Congress, right? We know Dewey Decimal. Government docs are cataloged using SUDOCs. It's specific to government documents. And they will come with a kind of already, like they're on it, like what that is. But government documents are cataloged differently in SUDOCs. If you are, just let you know, a government repository, you take any government documents, part of that is that they are shelved separately than your regular collection. They will be in a room, a floor, something that's separate than your normal library, and they will all be with the SUDOC cataloging. Again, it's separate from LC, it's separate than Dewey Decimal, it's another cataloging schema. One of the first, when I was in library school, I did an internship at a public library, and they kicked several government docs, and that was actually that's what I did for them for a year, was I organized all of their government information, all their government docs, so that they were supposed to be, they're supposed to be doing it, but it had not been done. So we got that figured out. The last type of item that you may be asked to catalog are local items. So these are items specific to your area, specific to what who, like what's going on with the in the area. So for example, let's say you're at Pasadena City College and they ask you, they come in every year and they say, music, like really big for colleges, music department, right? We have, our band is putting out recordings every year. So we want those, cataloged, right? You may be the only library that has it in the world, but you're gonna have everything for the music department there. You may have something very specific, like you may be cataloging the board reports every year. So every time that the board meets, those may be cataloged and put into archives. If you're in Pasadena, you may be cataloging the Rose Parade every year, right? A recording of a Rose Parade and putting that into your catalog. So those are local items specific to your library. Colleges, university and colleges are kind of known for this, right? They'll have generally a collection, something that they focus on. So for example, if you were to go to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas's library, they focus on their archives, and then kind of what they focus on is gambling. So they have a lot of material specific to gambling, more so than any other library in the world. So they have slot machines in there, they have tables. It's very interesting. If you have a chance to go, whenever you go to Las Vegas, if you ever go, swing by the UNLV library. It's very interesting. But they have local items specific to gambling because, right, that makes sense for them to collect those items. So keep that in mind. Things like, so items that are local. So like I got a little sidetrack there. I'm very sorry. So again, just the different types of items, just to be aware of, are fiction versus nonfiction. This can, so you're gonna have some fiction books, nonfiction books. Subject headings can be a question there of what you give the book. So for example, if it's a fiction book, let's say I'm reading a fictionalized version of Jack the Ripper. And I could put in there and I could say history, Jack the Ripper, right? But it's a fiction book. So what do you use for your subject headings versus an actual nonfiction book that was written about Jack the Ripper? So you have to be careful with subject headings, mostly when dealing with fiction versus nonfiction. Again, juvenile versus adult material, the same thing. So, and generally there is a juvenile subheading when you're cataloging these books, but just to be aware of the different subject headings, where you place it as well. Just keep that in mind. You may have a juvenile collection in the library you're in versus an adult collection, which would help with that. But just be aware of where you would put those. Serials, again, anything that comes out more than once serially. Questions to ask about yourself, what to ask yourself when you're looking at the serials, especially are, does the numbering change? So for example, this can be where I used to work, there was the student newspaper, not the student newspaper, the student, no, it was the student newspaper, I take that back, that came out for the university. About every 10 years or so, they would renumber it. They would do different numbering systems. And it was very frustrating, but you have to be aware of that. And you have to keep track of that. Or you have to, maybe the names change, right? So maybe something goes from, maybe a magazine changes its name. So you have to, keep track of all that when you're cataloging serials. And then again, integrating resources. Again, these are things that have different, they wouldn't all be updated at the same time. They would be updated differently. Again, web page, classic example of that, right? One page may be updated, not the other. We have our audio visuals, which is DVDs, VHSs, all that good stuff, streaming media. Spoken word, anything that's spoken. So that's recorded and spoken. Again, books on tape, that kind of a thing would be an example of spoken word. Music sound, sound recordings generally are what's found under music sound. Ebooks, government docs, again, SUDocs is what their catalog does. We're not going to really get that much into it, just be aware that they do have different classification system. And then our local items. The big thing to know about your local items is actually those are probably the main things you're going to be doing original cataloging with, or any of your local items. So that was probably very long. I have no idea how long this is, but I just briefly went over again, kind of the first chapter, content, media, and carrier types. And then we talked about what a monograph was and the different types of things you could be potentially cataloging. So just keep that in mind. Again, read the chapter. It goes into more detail than I did. Again, I have my office hours tonight at 4 to 6, from 5:30 for the last half hour, specifically 5:30 to 6. I will be going over Library World if anybody has any questions on that. If they're not able to get on, if they have questions on, where to go, where to look, that kind of a thing, let me log in there. If you can't make it for some reason, let me know as well, and we can always set up a time, or I can answer your questions via email or during the question answer. So thanks for listening to me, and good luck this week. I know you guys will do great. Another quick reminder, if for some reason we need to make an exception or be given an extension for some things that are going on in your life, please let me know sooner rather than later. It's easier for me to work with you the sooner I know. So have a great time. This is the first, at least one more lecture, maybe doing 2 more. So just look for those. They'll be coming tomorrow, at least one more. And then I hope to see some of you tonight if you have any questions. If not, I'll assume everybody's good. And I will talk to you. Well, I'll talk at you most likely tomorrow. Or if you have any questions, please let me know. Have a great week.